episode of the 411, I'll be catching up with a business leader who, to put it bluntly, has created a shit-hot place to work. We're going to be digging deep to understand what that means and how they've managed to achieve that. So if you're a business owner either going through growing pains at the moment or wanting to stand out in a crowded marketplace, then this podcast is for you. So welcome to the second episode of the 411. Today I'm joined by Andrew Fahey, who is the CEO of Brookson. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Very good. So let's talk about Brookson because I think it's fair to say there's been a lot of change in the last 20 or so years since you've worked here. So I'm going to try and get this right. So Brookson's a part of the world's largest supplier of support services to recruiters and contractors. In the last 20 years, you've gone from 25 staff to 300, 2 PE deals, 1 trade sale, 35 mil turnover, and 3 sites in the UK.
That's correct.
Yes.
And we're now part of a business called People 2.0, who are a global sort of provider of these services.
Okay, well. So there's going to be loads to talk about. So this podcast is all around talking about great businesses, what makes your business great, and I guess a lot of people listening are going to be business owners themselves or budding entrepreneurs who think, how do I start or scale up my business? So what we want, ideally, is to give them some really practical tips based on what you've experienced. Yeah. So if you could start off by telling us a little bit about your kind of start with Brookson's, because it was quite different, the original career you were going to go down, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I originally started as a software engineer, and there were 4 people that originally founded Brookson. 1 couple were from an IT background and 1 couple from an engineering background. And I sort of got took under the wing by the original director, the IT one. So I was a software engineer. I went and did my Microsoft certified systems administrator qualifications, and I was working within Brookson whilst I was studying to do that. And I guess what came quite apparent is I had a passion for what IT can do for the business more than I had a passion for IT itself.
Actually doing it.
And rather than say I wasn't very good at it, that's what we'll say.
Yeah.
And over the years, just got more and more involved in why the business wanted the solution rather than the software nuts and bolts itself. And that morphed over the years from a software engineer to sort of head of IT and operations, and then into leadership, and now the CEO of the Brookson Group. Okay,
so that's quite, hate the word journey, but it is quite a journey. I think one of the things when we talked a few weeks ago was that somebody really took you under their wing, and I imagine when you're starting out in your career, that's a really great opportunity to be given, isn't it? How did that work? Were you given exposure to all parts of the business, or...?
Yeah, and there's been several different mentors to start with, but from a technology perspective, that was definitely the case, and I'm sure we'll touch on this, but technology's always been at the heart of what the Brookson business tries to do. So we try to innovate and be disruptive in the sectors that we touch, and so just being involved in the technology meant I was involved in operations, in service delivery, in sales, in the back office support functions, and so. And of course at that time there were probably 25, 30 people, and so
you kind of touch and feel everything,
the divisions weren't the same as what they were today. Everybody sort of helped each other and did a bit of everything anyway, and that's an important grounding that probably did start some of the journey for me. Yeah, no, I agree totally.
So it's hard because Brookson's have been going for so long to kind of consolidate in a 30 to 40 minute podcast everything that's happened, but when we spoke we talked about some of the key milestones that have really shaped Brookson, starting with the adoption of technology pretty early on within the almost quite stereotypical old school industry of accounting. So do you want to talk us through what those key milestones were that really facilitated the growth?
Yeah, there's an ethos behind it, and then the milestones. Okay. So a business like Brookson could has lots of different labels put on it, and one of the labels is you're an accountant or a payroll provider for contractors and flexible workers. And most accountants that support the flexible workforce have a very traditional business model, so they charge people for the time it takes them to do that service. And because our business was set up by the contractors themselves, that they started out on a very different journey. They wanted it to feel supportive, empathetic. They wanted to make people feel safe and supported. And so right at the start, technology was the key to unlocking that. So examples would be most contractors will spend their weekend emptying shoeboxes of receipts out and typing them into spreadsheets to understand and that's never been part of Brookson. We've automated that. We were doing integration with banks well before that was the thing. We were the largest single user of the UK CHAP system at one point by integration. So it's always been part of what we do. In terms of the phases of growth within the business, probably put those in 3 or 4 buckets. So when the original founders, 2 of the founders bought the other 2 founders out. That was the first change, really.
Right.
And that was our first introduction to a debt structure within the business, to generating investment and really starting to professionalise the leadership team from lots of people that were really passionate about delivering a great customer experience and using technology to drive solutions. We've now started to have an FD, and we started to have MDs, and we started to have a leadership team. And then the second phase would be the first time we attracted PE investment into the business, and that's very different. There are more people that are influencing the strategy. There are more people that are looking for returns, and depending on the type of PE invest you have, there are different pushes and pulls. The great part of that is the significant investment in the business and diversification of strategies. And then the sort of third and final stage are where we are today in terms of we are now part of a trade merger with the largest provider of what they call EOR, so employer of record, and AOR, agents of record services. And so to summarise those, we have the owner-founder business stage, we have the first PE investment, and then we have where we are today, which we've merged into a global business.
Which is an amazing story, isn't it? But to get to all of those points, there's lots that Brookson's will have had to have done differently. And I know we spoke about private equity investment, and there will be people listening to this, I'm quite sure, who are looking at that as a route to potentially grow their business. You talked about how you behaved differently, almost before you were PE backed. Mm-hmm. Talk us through what that means. How did you do things differently?
Yeah, I think that was some great insight from the original founders, really, and part of their experience. So one of the things you hear lots of businesses say post the first round of PE investments is, it's not like it used to be, everything's changed. Mm-hmm. And what they're referring to there is the professionalisation, the accountability, so the way you report on the business, the way that you are required to have accountability, the decision-making and authority matrix suddenly are brought into the business. Strategy and accountability becomes very different. And we started to do that ahead of attracting PE investment. We actually recruited, and they're still part of our leadership team today, somebody who worked in a PE background to almost help us acclimatise ourselves. What will a PE business be looking for? What do we need to do? And so we had the relevant rigour from a financial perspective. We had the right strength and depth of our personnel. And lots of the feedback we've had through the multiple PE stages has been, that's unusual. Usually they have to spend the first year professionalising the business, and I think that was attractive and accelerated our journey as well.
Yes, you were really well set up, and I guess from the team perspective, there felt less of that immediate change because it had been going on for a period of time. Okay, so we might come back to some of the PE stuff and the trade sale, but if we just talk about people and the culture bit, one of the things that we talk a lot about at FOR is that we want to work with businesses who prioritise their people and culture for so many reasons. It makes it really interesting for us to work with those businesses. Candidates want to work in those businesses, and it also really aligns with how we operate as a company. So it just makes perfect sense. And I guess I'm really recognising the gap widening from those businesses that are still really quite old school, basic offering to employees, and those that either are really getting it right or the intent is there, because some businesses are still inevitably trying to kind of get it right. You, I think, described Brookson's as almost like 3 or 4 companies in one. You must have seen so much change from a culture perspective. Just talk us through almost what that change has been like, and how have you kept people engaged? And do you have examples of lots of people who were here on day one and still here now? Because such a change.
Yeah, I think the first thing is extremely hard. There's a saying, don't forget what made you famous, really, and it's good to have that in the back of your mind. And the reason why it's good to think about it like that are inevitably, as a business grows, it faces new challenges, it has opportunities, it has restrictions on how it behaves. And so you'll hear lots of people at lots of time talk about culture and how it might not be the same. And I think it's fair to say at various points in the career we've been ahead or behind the curve at recognising that. So the ethos of how we've treated our people is still the same as it is. Ultimately, our people are our product and our service. A set of accounts, a payroll run, a piece of management information it's a finite, it's either right or it's wrong. How you experience the business and the brand is what really drives the success of our business. So it's always been something we think a lot about, and we do that from a training, from a development perspective, from an integration perspective. Even when we've acquired businesses, we really sort of focus on that. And what I would sort of say has been the biggest learning and takeaway from us are those things that were really special to us when we first started. You just can't accomplish them the same way. But it doesn't mean that they don't exist in the business still. You have to delegate that responsibility. You have to have more people worrying about it. You have to create some systemized processes to capture some of the things that help shape and drive it. But I think if that essence, if that nucleus of you want to create a great place to work, have really intelligent, capable people who are challenged and driven to deliver a great customer experience, then it shines through.
Yeah, and I think that essence analogy was probably one I've not heard before until we spoke a few weeks ago. And I liked that analogy because, like you say, at 25 versus 300, you just can't do and behave the same way, can you? Are the original founders still involved to any degree or not?
No, they're not. They're not from a shareholder perspective, from an advisory perspective. The legacy most definitely is one of the original straplines of the Brookson business was by contractors for contractors. And although this is about customer experience rather than culture, what that means is everything we do, you look through the eyes of a customer.
Yeah.
This we should never behave like an accountant. We should never behave like a professional advisor. We should always look and act like how would we want to be serviced, and then shape the service from that perspective.
Around them. Yeah. Okay. Because I guess that came from a point of the original founders are maybe the ones most likely to find having that essence a bit tricky as opposed to everything that they stood for on day one.
And I think the other thing is you go through a journey like this, for as much as it's sad, it's right to say thank you at certain times in the journey, and it's time for people to get off the bus.
Yeah.
And that's quite an emotional thing to go through, especially for somebody that's been with the business. There are people who worked really hard and who were instrumental in driving success at a stage in the business. But either because they just didn't want to, they weren't able to, they were at a different stage in their life. Some people just need to exit at certain stages, and the way I think about that is we have a great alumni of people that we're forever grateful and connected to, rather than be sad that not everybody can stay with you for 2 decades and beyond.
Yeah, and I think, again, that alumni analogy I love, because you talk about good leavers and bad leavers, and ultimately people leave for a reason, don't they? But you want the brand to be real, to be something that's really positive in those people's minds, because you're just building that wider community, I guess, aren't you? Especially it's not as relevant now, but in a local area, you want people to have that kind of image. Okay, so there's a stat out there which is 41% of people leave the role because they feel a lack of belonging or they don't feel valued in what they do. From, I guess, maybe more from almost HR, people, culture side of things, are there certain things that Brookson now do that really take people on that journey and so that they feel part of the Brookson story now? Any examples that you can give?
So I'll start with something we didn't do that well and then sort of progress from there. So we're the face of the flexible workforce. That's what we do. We support flexible working. And I'm almost slightly embarrassed to say that until the pandemic, probably like most businesses though, we did not offer and afford our people the same level of flexibility, almost frowned upon it.
Right.
And from a good place, from a customer experience place, that if you are here and you're working and everybody, we can see that and we know what service experience. I'm really pleased at where we've we've morphed to now. So we have a full flexible working environment. We have 3 locations over the country. We have a national recruitment footprint now. People can check into our office using an app, and we record their well-being. So everybody's trained and inducted in our service experience. Doesn't matter where you work, but I want you to know what it feels like to be a customer. You walk through the life, the journey. We have significant investments in learning and development for our people as well. And then one of the things that we always do for new starters that come in, and hopefully this stays with them as well, is any new starter to our business is more like our customer than we are. Most of our customers are journeying into freelancing, into flexible working for the first time, and we're so close to it now. We can't see some of our problems, so we ask every new person that comes in, if you don't understand something that we do, if there's a process, if we're training you in something that doesn't make sense, just shout, and we reward our staff as well for sort of unblocking these problems and really finding where we're not grabbing hold of that customer experience properly. So hopefully that's a useful example of how we've created this nice hybrid flexible working, and we try and bring them into shaping the customer experience from the very first day that they're here as well.
Yeah, and I think if people feel listened to and that they're adding value, well, that will make them feel good about themselves, and they'll want to be here, won't they? It's that simple. You mentioned about an app. Just talk us through what that looks like.
Yeah, so as a lead, the same as everybody, when COVID first happened and everybody worked remotely, there was a lot of stress and anxiety around our people working. It was very nice weather, wasn't it? So you just assumed everybody was
what
sunbathing.
Are people doing?
Yeah. And actually, as that sort of migrated, what we know is we've got really good people that are empowered and value this. Now, what the app gives us is the ability across any of our locations for somebody just to check in, and they book a desk. It goes through the relevant sort of health and safety and onboarding perspective, but it does 2 things for us. One, it allows us to make sure people are plugging into the mothership enough, so we can make sure that they are still engaging in the culture, the environment, the energy, but also it gives them complete flexibility to work where they want, when they want, at the time they want as well. And given we're a technology-enabled business, we've tried to use that as well to support our people as well as customers. Yeah,
so I guess you kind of looked at yourselves and thought, right, we don't actually offer it to our staff. And look, I get that. We're a recruitment company, and sometimes I think about our internal recruitment processes, we need to refine those, and we actually had that meeting the other day, and it is crazy, isn't it? But I know loads of businesses that say the same. Marketing companies, their websites are the worst because they're focusing so much on their clients. So it's a common problem, but it is definitely one that if you can try and fix it, it will help with staff retention and engagement, I guess. So one of the things that we talked about also, and it probably came out towards the end of our conversation, but I thought this was really relevant, was leadership style. And it came out because you told me a particular anecdote which you might share with us today, but it really, I guess, it indicated without you even having to articulate it what kind of leader you are, and then we started talking about that. So in your 20-year career, you've held a lot of senior posts. I guess how have you evolved as a leader, and what style have you adopted that you feel works? And has it been, there's a lot of questions here, has it been a natural style or has it been a taught style? Because again, we're not all born knowing how to be leaders, are we?
Yeah, definitely not. And it has evolved over the years. I'd like to think I'm more considered. I was definitely somebody that had more passion and energy than subtle ability earlier on in my career, and I guess one of the things that really did change me was going through a global pandemic and a cyber attack. You know, they were the 2 things. So I've been with the business in all its various shapes and forms now for 2 decades, and over that time you become completely integrated into the fabric of the business. So as a leader, very intuitive women in the Brookson group. I know more through walking around and speaking to people and water cooler moments. I can gauge what's going on in the business far more than reading the board pack and reading the
So you're very present and visible then?
Yeah. I'd say so. And so the first thing that really was a challenge in my leadership style as the CEO was when COVID first happened, because 80% of the intuition, those touch points I had, suddenly removed, and even ringing people using, say, Microsoft Teams or Zoom, you now have the CEO ringing you in your bedroom, which creates a very different dynamic and a very different relationship. And so even those relationships where that I would extract information from previously were now formal all of a sudden as well. And so I've had to sort of learn and adapt to get that and create environments where I can still get the enjoyment I get from interacting with people and the managers and the leaders within the business, but also making sure that the sense I need of making sure this business is operating is correct. So that was something that I've had to now force a little bit more. We have breakfast with the CEO meetings. We have I have sort of virtual inductions for all the staff. I tell them the story of the sort of founding of the business now, take them on that
journey. So do you
journey.
Still meet all the new people?
Yeah, every single person that comes in.
Okay.
There was a stage where I was in every single final stage interview.
When did that start?
Probably 3 years ago.
Because that's a conversation we've had internally recently, both about our own recruitment but our clients, and more I'm hearing more in an owner-manager environment go back to, I just want to meet that person before we offer them to make sure that they are the right cultural fit. And it's interesting, and those businesses that employ 200-300 people, so a lot of people could say it's bad use of time, but it sounds like you were doing that up until relatively recently.
It's such a subjective view, isn't it? It's really hard, and so ultimately having that final say, and it reduced to them, and so now I still do over senior positions, and I guess that, if I'm being completely honest, the thing that changed it more for me was the need to empower other people. So it was the impact I was having on budget holders and managers rather than actually me being comfortable. That was the original driver.
Okay.
We talked about the business and growth stages. As you attract people who maybe have worked for bigger organisations, as you prepare for the next stage of growth, it can feel quite restrictive. It can feel potentially like you don't have confidence in them as well. So that was a real driver for me, an empowerment. Yet I now replace that with, I do the initial induction for everybody within the first week. People that are in the office, I do them here, I do them virtually. I make sure that we check in 2 or 3 times. I run the whole, if it doesn't work and you don't understand it, let me know, because some people feel it's a trick. You start a new job and say, if you don't understand it, put your hand up. You're not going to put my hand up, because I mean, I'm not. Actually, if I do that though, there's a safety net to that than telling the manager, and that allows me to sort of have a bit of a back to the shop floor essence going on as well. Yeah, okay.
And I think you told me the cyber attack story, and what came out of that was you're very open and transparent, aren't you? Is that natural? Is that learned behaviour almost?
I mean, something I'd never want to repeat. Not sure there is a rule book, because lots of lawyers do that, but I guess there's no set way of how you behave to your business, to your customers. Ultimately, you're being subject to a criminal activity. And the way I went about this, which I try to do with most things, is that I'm going to be open and I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be balanced about that. And so I decided, most businesses, and this isn't criticism, I completely understand it, most businesses will say there's been a system glitch and try to do that. There had been other cases in and around our sector, and so I felt that would be dishonest. It just wouldn't work. So I was very honest about that. And that got a lot of good traction initially. I think the problem with breaking out of the corporate veil and being the spokesman of doing that is, unfortunately, these cyber attacks take quite a time to resolve, and so I put myself at the forefront of when it didn't go so well for some customers as well, which was an interesting experience. And not one I'd want to repeat. It's not nice, your mum reading some of the comments that people say, but ultimately, it was for the good. I still stand by that decision, for me to come out personally, give people assurances, and try to be as open and honest about what was happening as I could. Yeah,
and I think you said to me you just want to treat people how you would want to be treated. and you can read all the business textbooks in the world, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
But there are some fundamental, just real basics that if it feels right to behave and say things in a certain way, then it probably is almost. So some of it isn't rocket science, is it? And I think sometimes we can overcomplicate things by talking about leadership styles. I think there are some behaviours that need to be taught and learned, but there's a lot to be said. Just being really real and kind of saying it as it is almost.
And I think for the cyber attack, it's such an you are being subject to a vicious criminal behaviour, so it's such an extreme one. But so but there have been many other day-to-day instances, restructuring programs, the investment from overseas, moving from private to PE. I've just always taken the approach of being open and honest and taking people through the journey and explaining why I think it would be good for people, rather than to create a fabric that will maybe designed to protect people, but ultimately
can do the opposite. Yeah, no, totally. Okay, and then I guess for any, again, business owner, there's always their own personal development, and as companies grow, and I guess you're quite a bit bigger now, I get that, but this need almost to kind of create capacity, because you can't do what you did when you were 100 staff. And I think lots of business owners that I still meet now are still a bit running around trying to do everything despite having a bit of structure. Are there certain things that you've done that have really allowed you to create that capacity and allowed you to scale that you could maybe share?
And again, haven't always got it right, and I haven't always done it at the right time. I think that the first thing is I moved pretty quickly to make sure my leadership team is strong and right. And that's involved some reshaping of the leadership team, it's involved some external hires, it's involved the removing of some external hires as well. But what really allowed me to move into the CEO role and now into a broader, more sort of global thought leadership role with People 2.0 is just the strength and depth of the leadership team and the people that have been ingrained in this is how we do it, here are our behaviours. And I know that they would make a decision that would be based on the right values and behaviours. Even if I didn't agree with it, I don't think there would be a time where I would question the drivers. And that's so important to allow you to step back, to be involved in more strategic opportunities. And that's been the biggest for me. It's when you get that structure wrong, it's actually more limiting,
more damaging,
because you are still you're fighting those battles with the people that aren't right, and you don't get any of the benefit of the time as well.
And I think, again, we talk a lot about empowering people, don't we? But I think your point then was almost that even if there was a decision that you didn't necessarily agree with, unless it was business critical, you just respect them that they knew what they were doing, and that maybe feels really easy to do, but I think it's much harder than it probably seems, that, isn't it?
It does, and I think one of the things that being in a business like Brookson, it's subject to regulatory volatility, and we've had the global pandemic and we had the cyber attack. There are shared battle scars of going through that, and you really get to find out what people are like when you're in the trenches as well. And I think that that's certainly helped me, that there are people that I have, it feels like professional wars we've been involved in, and we've had each other's back through thick and thin, and so that really helps. I know that's not always the case, especially in businesses. Now, as we talked about before, we now have we have the framework, we know what being Brookson's like, and so we'll have to induct more people into our leadership and management team that won't have been through those experiences, but we'll have a very clear way of the strengths and the behaviours and the values that those people will need to be part of our team.
Okay, and I think that leadership team, again, that's almost a podcast in its own right, isn't it? So that's maybe something we can come back to at a later date. Couple of final questions. The role of a CEO, even with an amazing leadership team, can be quite lonely sometimes, can't it? What do you do to invest in yourself from like a personal development perspective?
It feels like that's a sort of, everybody says that, and it's one of those things that you don't actually realise how lonely until you're in there, especially when you're faced with those big decisions that impact people personally as well. And so there are a few things, and so I've made use of the chairman I have over the years. I think especially when you're managing your own team, you're managing investors. It's been great to have good chairmen that I respect professionally and challenge you intellectually as well. That's been great. But also I've engaged my own private coach, and that's been a mixture of probably more therapy than professional development, if I'm honest.
We all need that.
Yeah, and it's just a safe space that you can say those things that you can't. So no matter how great your leadership team is, there are some things that ultimately sit on your shoulders, and I think that has been. It was so valuable to me through COVID and through the exit strategy. And I'm sure they need therapy after some of our sessions, but it's such a worthwhile investment, and I would recommend people in this position need somebody who's completely removed from the business and the detail, that can just do that so what test on you that almost sometimes just you're right.
No, I agree, and I struggle to see how you could be a business leader and almost not have that external input. I know our accountants have this, they have a business group, and it's all around the fact that if you've got athletes at the top of their game, to get to the top of their game, they have a load of people around them to make them better at every tiny bit. Yet almost in the working world, that's not seen in such a positive way, and it makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So no, I'm a massive advocate of that. So I guess to end on then, what does the future look like for Brookson's? Because I think there's all sorts of exciting things going on, isn't there?
Yeah, so I am, as a CEO, the sort of strapline is to leave the business in a better shape than you found it. And for the merger with People 2.0, a business that all they do is think about the professional, flexible workforce all over the globe. For us to be part of that feels like we found the forever home for Brookson. Somewhere that it's always going to be taking those customer experience values that we talked about and how we want our people to be forever. So that's amazing. But what that means for us is we are now going to sort of become an EMEA, so Europe, Middle East and Africa, the centre of excellence for an EMEA platform, where we'll be looking to broaden out our operational structure to support the whole of Europe in terms of supporting and taking the Brookson business model and that ethos of our customer experience and the ethos around our approach to technology, and becoming this centre of excellence that rolls that out across the globe. And that changes my role as well. So as much as I'm still the CEO and will remain the CEO of Brookson, I'm moving into the Executive Vice President of Independent Contractor Services, which is basically taking the blueprint of Brookson and working with leaders all over the globe to create what we've done at Brookson everywhere.
Wow, okay, so that's really going to challenge you and kind of expand your skill set. So we probably need to do another podcast in a few years' time, and you can talk to us about the international expansion.
It's been great for people. So we've got people now who've already are working in Netherlands, in Germany, and so it's happening already because we've got the virtualization and we're part of a global business. And so it's what a great thing for a business in Warrington to say we can place you anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and I remember I said to you when I first came here earlier that I remember coming here when it was a Warrington-based business and the talent pool that you were looking at was Warrington, and that was probably only 5 years ago. So to go from that to the global opportunities in a few years, it has been probably something that you wouldn't have anticipated.
It is. I'll probably be saying lots of American acronyms next time we speak, but other than that, it's an amazing opportunity.
Fab. No, I look forward to it. And look, thanks so much for your time. I think there's loads that people will have taken for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.